It's the Happy Families podcast with Dr. Justin Coulson, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. We're Luke and Susie, a husband and wife radio team and the parents of 3 young boys, and today we are talking about teenagers acting like toddlers. Justin, the question that Tracy has sent through I think is a common one for teenage parents. She's written, teenagers, question mark, question mark, question mark. How do you stop them fighting, whinging, nagging, being lazy? It's like they are toddlers again, but too big to pick up and put in a time out.
Yeah, they usually are. They're usually bigger than us. Yeah. So there's 4 or 5 questions in there. Which one should we concentrate on? Are we talking about just disciplining teenagers? Is that kind of Tracy's question, do you think?
I think ultimately that's where it's going. We've got behaviour that's coming out in teenagers that, you know, it happens when they're toddlers. It stops for a while in the middle and then it comes back as teens. What do we do when it comes back? Because we can't treat them like toddlers anymore.
Yeah, sure. And when we do, they tend to respond poorly. The 3 E's of effective discipline, I talk about it all the time, but this is such a critical part of it. Before we go there, though, I think that it's important to consider what our relationship with our teenager is and also why they are the way they are. So let's talk about those 2 things briefly. Then we'll talk about the 3 E's, and that's probably all we'll have time for.
Okay.
First of all, imagine you're a teenager and your parents ask you to do something that doesn't suit you. What was your reaction?
Probably not fit for this show.
Yeah. So we have these expectations about our teenagers. We kind of think, well, hang on, I was one, but now look at where I am now. Look at who I've developed into. Look at my maturity. I would never do that now. And we kind of expect our teenagers to be who we are because we've done the development, so they should just know that and be there. Right. We forget that they're teenagers and they're going through the same thing that we went through. It's really hard to put ourselves in their position, and they're seeming to be so unreasonable to us and so much attitude and eye rolling and just so lazy, like that email said. And yet this is what we were usually like. Now, I know not everyone was. Some of us were wonderful A-grade teenagers. But
yeah, well, I mean, enough about me. Let's talk more about Susie.
So that's the first thing. Just remember what you were like or what most teenagers are like. Second thing is, imagine your relationship with your teenager is a bucket. Mm-hmm. A bucket is good for carrying, well, one thing primarily, water. That's why we have buckets, to move water. If the water in the bucket represents the connection that you have with your teen, the air represents what I call the correction and direction that you're giving to your teen. Now, we want to have a full bucket.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be full of air. We want it to be full of water. But if Tracy and any parent of any teenager were to examine their interactions with their teenager and work out how much water's in the bucket, chances are it's mostly air. In fact, most parents that I talk to will say, yeah, about 90% air, about 10% water. We're not actually connecting very well with our teenagers. And when there's no relationship, rules just lead to rebellion. It's like, why are you always telling me what to do? Like, think about your morning with your teenager. How much did you say, do this, do that? Why haven't you done it already? And by the way, you've done it wrong. Because that's all correction and direction. How much did you say, gee, I love having you in our family. When I see you walk out of your bedroom in the morning, you're like a ray of sunshine. And I know that sounds a little bit trite and cheesy, but you know, we're talking about this connection. Hey, what are you looking forward to today? What's going on in your world? Let's sit down and have a chat. I know people are like, but no one's got time for that in the morning. But what about things like, is there anything you need help with before you head off to school? What can I do to support you? That creates connection as well. And it positions us as an ally rather than an enemy. So that's what we've got to focus on. How do we build this relationship with our teens so that they actually want to help us, so that they want to have a nice attitude towards us?
I can sense that we're heading towards a place where we're going to be filling our bucket with water with your next lot of advice.
Well, for some of us, it definitely feels like there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza. Dear Liza, there's a hole in the bucket. Dear Liza, a hole.
Now, you've talked about already the concept that we should be, in teenage years, more focused on actually building this relationship than on the correction side of things in our world. But
connection more than correction.
But how do we address the stuff that does need to be corrected?
Yeah, right. So this is the big one, right? Because everyone's like, well, now we're just getting into namby-pamby, cotton-wooling, spoon-feeding our kids. They're bubble-wrapped and there's no discipline, there's no limits. And I understand that concern, but here's the really big challenge around this. When you're with somebody who's constantly telling you what to do, Do you feel motivated to help them? Do you like being around them?
No, not generally. No.
If we're in a relationship like that with somebody, we tend to avoid them. And that's, I think, at least part of the reason why our teenagers are like this to us. We need to patch up the bucket. We need to keep the water in the bucket. We've got to actually, maybe there's no hole in the bucket. We just haven't put any water in for a while because we're constantly on our kids' backs. Yeah, it's just, it's gone, and there's only air in that relationship bucket.
We're going to take this analogy as far as we can.
This bucket, we are going to rock it all the way through.
So if we're going to have rules and if we're going to have limits, the best way to get those to stick is to have a good relationship. So spend time with your teenager and actually engage. And by the way, if you haven't done this for a while, they may be resistant. They may be like, what do you want? They might push back. What we're trying to do, though, is we're trying to build this connection. Then we get to have the conversation maybe in a couple of weeks.
Right.
Where we explore, we explain, and we empower. So we explore by saying, for the last few months, every time I've brought this up, you've gotten cranky, you've walked out of the room, you've slammed the door, you've just refused, you've said, it's not my job, I shouldn't have to do it. I feel like something's not quite right here. Can you help me to understand what's actually going on? Why is it so hard to be nice to your sister? Why is it so hard to put the rubbish bin out once every week on a Thursday night? We explore, then we explain. In our family, we've all got to work together. You know that. I mean, keep your explanation short. And then empower. You say, all right, so you get where I'm coming from. I definitely understand you in a way that I didn't until we had this conversation. What do we do about this? Put it back onto our teenager. The other question that I love, other than what do we do about this, is how can I help so that we can make this work as a family? Yeah. As we do that, we're actually treating our children like people, not problems, which means that they're more likely to engage with us, feel connected to us. And when there's water in that bucket, they're happy to have a splash. They're happy to play around. They're happy to, be part of what we're doing.
It strikes me that the majority of the things that you've talked about, while we can understand the wisdom of it, comes at even if it's not a time expense, it's certainly a insight at the most stressful and difficult times of our day expense, when we feel like we're at our limit anyway of remembering all the right things to do. How do we go about it?
A couple of really quick things here. First of all, you cannot discipline somebody. I mean, this is all about teaching, right? Discipline is teaching. It's not about punishing, it's about teaching. You cannot discipline somebody when there's a lot of emotion or when there's time pressure or when there's an audience. It's not going to work. So if you've got this issue right now, just deal with it later. Kick it down the road. Deal with it tonight when everyone's calm. Deal with it tomorrow morning or on Saturday when you can go to the cafe and buy their favourite milkshake. Kick it down the road. Deal with the emotional stuff when you're in a nice cool emotion rather than a hot emotion. That's the first thing. Second thing is it does take time. But as the late, great Stephen Covey said, we need to remember that fast is slow and slow is fast. You can go for the quick fix, but you're going to have to keep on putting the Band-Aid on and then ripping it off and putting it on and ripping it off. The quick fix doesn't work long term. The slow, steady internalization takes a long time to build, but my goodness, it gets you much better results down the track because we've actually grown character in a child rather than being the external police making them do stuff. Yeah. Especially with teenagers.
If there's one thing I take away from this discussion, it's that as opposed to with toddlers, with teenagers, we've got much more grace in when we can address issues. We've got much more time. They can reason enough to understand that you're talking about a behaviour that happened a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
Or a day ago.
If you don't address it immediately, you're not ruining their life.
You're right. Although I would say with toddlers, we can actually address it later as well. We don't give toddlers enough credit for their ability to do it. But again, toddlers is a different topic. I just think we get too hard on our toddlers. We just need to distract them, find something to amuse them, and then talk in 10 seconds. You know what happened before? Just we need to be kind.
Like what I do with Luke.
Again, you're not giving toddlers enough credit.
Dr. Justin Coulson, thanks for addressing this question from Tracy. We appreciate it.
Yeah, great conversation. Thanks.
If you've enjoyed the podcast, we'd love for you to leave a review on iTunes.
Like Samantha did, I really enjoy hearing his outlook. I grew up very differently from my children, and I'm trying to break the cycle that my parents have given me. I just want to have a happy family and feel very fortunate to have found and heard these podcasts. I can only hope I do a good job raising my littlelies. If I wasn't so far from him, I'd book him here so I could hear his advice firsthand.
Well, if you'd like Justin to speak at your school or organisation, all you got to do is visit happyfamilies.com.au.